Wow.
A couple of weeks ago, or a month ago, I also did a review of my old school gear from the last time I did the North Boundary in 1995. So, and in that video I hinted that I was going to talk about the evolution of some gear. So if you look on the table here, this video is about my new cook set, and it's about the evolution of cook gear. So as many of you know, I've been hiking for 35 years now. And this is cooking gear. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the evolution of cooking gear over the years. So first thing I want to show you is back in the good old days, this was my very first camp stove, and it's by a company called Camping Gas. It's the Bleuet, and I just took out the old canister that was in there. I want to show you something. So if you check out this canister, once it was screwed in there, you could not remove it. So the way it used to work is you would open the legs up like this, shove that in there, and you can see there's a needle. And actually you would unscrew this top part. I'm not going to do it, everything's kind of seized in there. But you would put this on, close the legs over it, and then screw the top back in quickly, and it would puncture the canister, and then the canister stayed attached. So this is the precursor to the modern day butane canister. So this one actually is butane. It's 90% butane, 10% propane. So it's a typical blend that you find nowadays. Now this thing, I'm holding it, I dare say weighed nearly a pound, which is a pretty impressive, and then the canister. So back in the days, this was my first stove, and I had this stove for quite a few years. I'm just going to put it aside. Now, when I had that stove in the good old days, all I had was this aluminum pot. I don't have the lid for this anymore, but aluminum was extremely popular for years. It's still popular, but aluminum fell out of favor for a while because people got scared. There were some scares that aluminum was directly linked to Alzheimer's, which, you know, based on all the research I can do, it turns out to be false. Aluminum is an extremely reactive substance, and it immediately reacts and forms a layer of aluminum oxide on top of the pot, and then that's why it doesn't corrode. So the fact that it doesn't corrode, doesn't get attacked by mild acids, makes it extremely unlikely that it would lead to health effects, and it's not listed as a carcinogen by the Food and Drug Administration. So, in fact, aluminum is an additive in a lot of foods. So in the good old days, we used to bring a pot like this. Now this is 200 milliliters, and a pot like this, I got my notes here, this pot weighed 58 grams. So think about it, 58 grams. So on a per 100 milliliter basis, this is 12 grams per 100 milliliters of capacity. So 200 milliliters like this, just under 2 cups would, sorry, not 200 milliliters. This was 500 milliliters. 2 cups is what this was. So in the good old days, my cook set comprised of a gas stove like this, an aluminum pot, and of course, you've seen in my videos for nearly 20 years, I've had this plastic mug with me that weighs nearly nothing. And when I eat, you know, basically you're boiling water, you're rehydrating a pack of food, or I'm cooking over a fire, and I have a cup for my soup and my coffee or whatever. And that was sufficient for the longest time, is what I brought.
This is just a soup? Well, I'm videoing you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, then this is the first course, and then the next course will be, I don't know, probably some crab dinner.
Why does it say busy?
Because it's taping.
Oh.
I got 2 cups, just the 2 cups in there, nothing more. This canister is getting empty, so I'm just gonna try and finish this, and then I'll change. I have that one was half empty when I left the house, and this one's also half empty. That's the problem, is I keep bringing half empty canisters, I guess. That's the other advantage of cooking here. The awning protects this heat, so it's boiling quickly. Now, the next evolution in my gear was to actually buy a stove. And my next stove after the gas one was actually, I figured since I had a gas one, I might as well buy a liquid stove. And here is a very famous, very trustworthy, very reliable Msr Whisper Light. And I have videos that show this being used. I'm not going to use it in here, but the way a liquid fuel stove works is that it comes in two parts. It has a pump, and what you do is you have different sizes of bottles for your fuel. So a bottle like this could last me, with my family, this would last, alone this would last me 3-4 days. With my family, this would last me a weekend. Then I had bottles like this for extended trips, and then I had bottles like this for when I would go on a 12-day trip. And there's pros and cons to gas, and I'll direct you to the tag here to another video that I have that explains the pros and cons. But in a nutshell, there's a lot more energy in a liquid fuel than there is a stable liquid fuel than there is in propane or butane. So on a net weight basis, there's more energy in here. And the advantage of a fuel like this and a system like this, so what you did is unfortunately they all have fuel in them, but you'll see in the other video, the pump goes inside here, and then once you have the pump, you attach the pump to the stove, you pump it up, and what this stove would do is you burn a little bit of fuel in the bottom here, and then after that, the heat of that little bit of fuel heats the liquid fuel in here and vaporizes it. So starting one of these is a little bit tricky, but once it's started, they're extremely efficient. And the beauty of a liquid stove fundamentally is that they're more efficient in winter, because in winter these things don't vaporize. The propane and the butane in these things stays liquid in winter, and they lose a lot of their capacity. So a gas or a liquid stove has some very important advantages, and I still use this stove. In fact, I brought it not too long last year on a extended family trip. When I go with the whole family and there's 4 of us, I'd rather cook on this stove because it's a very stable platform and it can hold a large pot, and I can bring a decent amount of fuel that will last a long time. And they're also very useful in winter when you're burning constantly because you're melting snow. So I don't talk about this very often, but boiling is one way to make sure that you have clean water. Right now, that water comes from over there behind those boxes. It's coming right out of the hill, so it's fairly clean. I drink it no problem like that, but one often overlooked way of cleaning water is to just simply boil it. Second stove I bought, since I already had a gas one, is I bought a liquid stove. And then the other advantage of a liquid stove is, well, it's a disadvantage, is that they do have a few more moving parts. So when you buy one of those, you typically have to buy a kit with O-rings and things like that, because the O-rings in these bottles will tend to fail over time. This pump has a lot of O-rings and parts in there, so you need a kit. And this weighs, actually this weighs a ton. This weighs easily a pound. So there you go. But there's pros and cons to everything. Here's a jug of Coleman fuel, and a jug of Coleman fuel like this will last you several years and cost you $12. I get asked this question a lot too. The fuel in here is a cut from a refinery called naphtha. And naphtha and kerosene are very close. They also happen to be jet fuel, and so you'll often hear these referred to as kerosene stoves. fundamentally, this fuel is naphtha, but as a marketing gimmick in the 50s, Coleman started calling it camping fuel, and then they called it white gas. You'll often see it referred to as white gas because when you pour it, it's crystal clear like water. So it's just a marketing gimmick. So camp fuel, naphtha, white gas, and to a almost lesser extent, kerosene are all the same thing. There's a slight difference with kerosene, but
boiling water just outside the tent for our morning coffee. Pouring rain outside. I'd say we're pretty much defeated today. We're not going to go forward. It looks like there's snow up in the higher elevation, so I think we're turning around and going home.
Now, after I had that for a few years, then I finally upgraded my pot. So the first time I upgraded my pot was about 15 years ago, and I still have it. And I upgraded my pot. I'll take this stuff out of here. You've seen this on many, many trips. The first pot after my aluminum pot, you know, as I started realizing that this was too small for going with a family, I got this set. This is the very classic Msr Alpine Set. This is a 2-liter pot, and this is a 1-liter pot, or 1.5 liter pot. And then you have a lid that serves, that can be used both ways and can serve as a frying pan. Now, when using this pot, that's when having a gripper is important. This is an aftermarket gripper. It came with its own gripper, but I don't have it anymore. But an aftermarket gripper so you can quickly pick it up off your stove or off the fire. Trust me, I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of nights in the wilderness with this thing. And the advantage of this one is stainless steel is its size, and the ability of stainless steel to carry heat is pretty good, but not nearly as good as aluminum. But this is solid. This after 20 years of use, this is not deformed, and still useful, and I still use it. And I'll do a last comparison at the end when I talk about all the pots. But so for years I used this with the liquid stove, and then eventually I went to another Msr product, not the Whisper Light. I can't remember. That's how much of a gearhead I'm not. I don't remember the names of all my equipment. But this little stove on top of this of a canister like this. Now this is a resealable canister. So a little stove like this. Whoop, valve was on. This served me for years. Again, there you go. Now to add just a wee bit of stability, I would often bring just a set of legs like that, and there you go. So now you have a setup that I use for quite a few years. Got water going for a cup of soup, but more importantly, I get my oysters. Oh. One thing I forgot to mention, the Whisper Light came with an aluminum shield like this that you could put around the stove. Now I've carried this shield with all the stoves I've used, not just that one. But the other thing you can do is if you have you don't need a fancy shield. Sometimes you might have something like a sitting pad or something like this. There's that fuel popping. If you're making your fire, you can still just put something like this around and block some wind. There's all sorts of ways to improvise. What I'm saying is you don't need to bring, if you don't have a a shield for your stove. Don't sweat it. But I want to show you something neat. Last year when I went hiking with Eric had this shield from Optimus, and he used a Dremel or some sort of tool to zip it, to cut it, and he made a really small, cool shield just for this stove. Now, so this setup, let me take it apart real quick. So the pocket rocket, in this pot with the stove and the gripper and the stand, one spoon, the lid. Actually, I used to bring this little plastic cup as well. I found it handy for scooping out water. But as a minimum, this was my my cook kit for a good 10 years. So now let me show you. So then after that, the next thing of gear that I replaced over the years was I went from the stainless steel pot, I went to an anodized aluminum one. So this is, again, it's an MSR. This is looking brand new. I never use this. All I bring would be the pot and the gear from here. So for the last 5 years or so, I've been using this pot, the pocket rocket, my stand, my spoon, my gripper, and taking this into the field. Now on a weight basis, I'll show you a weight comparison. You'll be surprised in the end how little change there is in actual weight between all these things when you do it on a weight per volume basis. But this pot, again, I use my pots over fires all the time. This size of a pot was actually a little bit lighter than, this is a liter, this is 1.5 liters. There's a bit of a weight saving here, but the weight saving comes mostly from the fact that the pot is smaller, not from the change in material as much. And I use this on fires, and I use it over a stove, and I thought this was this is a great size for melting water, melting snow, because what happens is the ratio of snow to water is about 10 to 1. So when you have a liter pot like this, if you put 1 liter of snow, it'll melt and it'll give you 100 milliliters of water. So think about it. If you want to use this to refill, let's say, an Nalgene bottle, you need 10 of these to fill an Nalgene bottle. That's a lot of snow, so you're melting a lot of stuff. And so in the winter, I still like to use a decent sized pot like this. In my pocket. Ah, yes. Fresh snow. Folks, Marty's in heaven. Whew. Now, my latest purchase is this Toaks 750 milliliter pot. And I like the fact that it's actually acts like a cup, has a bailing handle on it, so you can hang it over something. You can also remove the handle if you don't want it and shave, 10 grams or so. But and then it has has the lid with a couple of holes to prevent it from bubbling over when you're boiling something. Also helps you to strain. I'll tell you right now, this little handle for the pot lid is basically useless, because when it falls over it gets hot, and then trying to lift it is a pain in the butt. You can see, even though this is new this year, it's been used quite a bit, but So it's 750 mils, which is a pretty good size. It's too small for melting snow because you're constantly refilling it. But once you're in summer mode, and you know a typical lunch requires, or a typical dinner requires 2 cups of water and maybe a 1/3 cup for your coffee or whatever. So it's a perfect size for that. It's compact. Now in my cook set right now, I carry a small pocket knife. I carry sometimes a little bit of dishwashing detergent. I'll show you the stove. A typical small canister, the 230 gram canisters that hold that can last me a good 3 days, fit in there. And then in the bottom I put my scrub pad. Actually, just a trick, you know, I weigh them before a trip. So when it says 140 grams gross, that means 70 grams left of fuel in there, which is about half a canister. But so what I carry now is my foamy, my scrubby, this, a little bit of soap, my knife, and I just want to show you the another piece of gear I bought about 2 years ago. I didn't talk about it much in the last few years, but this is the BRS stove, which I think caught the hiking community by storm, because this is literally a 25 gram stove. 25 gram. Not a lot of moving parts. I have 0 issues with it. I'll screw it on top of a small of a canister like this. I'll just show you. I have 1 issue with it. 2 issues. One is it's very flimsy on top, so you can't hold much more than a pot about this size. And if you don't have a wind guard and you have a pot about this size, you'll get it to a boil. But if you start putting something much more significant, like say a liter pot, by the time you put a liter on there, especially if it's windy, the heat input and output almost get to a point where you have as much cooling going on as you have heating. So it's very hard to get a pot of a liter boiling with this thing. But why would you ever need to? So if you're just interested in boiling enough for your soup, this is plenty of capacity to do that. But there is a small design issue with there. You can see these arms get red hot when the flame is going, and then they tend to bend over. And so you know, it's just an issue that hasn't caused me grief, but they are bent over. So yeah, when you combine this, I mean, this is a small of a, this is a miniature. This is as small as I can make my cook set. Put this in there. You'll see videos. You'll see in the you know, all these things being used in some of the clips. And there you go. So over the years, I've gone from this, over the years I've gone from this to this. And there's at least 3 pounds of weight difference. Now, I just want to talk about the weight difference real quick. So, I've talked about stainless steel, aluminum, anodized aluminum, and titanium. They all have advantages and disadvantages. But I did some math here, and when I do a volume, the weight of the pot divided by the volume, and I get a weight per volume, and then I bring it up to a standard of 100 milliliters. The aluminum pot is actually 12 grams per 100 milliliters of capacity. The anodized is actually 10.7 per 100 milliliters of capacity. The titanium is 12.1, and the stainless steel is 15 grams per 100 milliliters. So on a weight, strength, thermodynamic efficiency, and other factors, the best material is, the winner overall for me is the anodized aluminum. So titanium is nice, but if manufacturers would go back to making a small 500 milliliter cup style pot out of anodized aluminum, that would be, I think, the big winner. So anyways, hope you enjoyed that quick video. Just wanted to show the evolution of cook gear over the years and talk about my newest piece of gear. I won't do a separate review because lots of people have done reviews on the Toast pot. If you like this, hit the subscribe button, give me a like, and by all means provide some comments. I love that dialogue between viewers and myself. Cheers folks, and get off the beaten path.